In some countries, we get our power from God. In some countries, well, we have a king who got his power from God. In some countries, it's just whoever is the baddest dude is the guy, right? Those are all answers, right? But the American answer, as I think of it, is government operates from consent. So if I believe that government protects rights and operates from consent, and you think something else, then our chances of deciding how should we have socialized medicine, or how should we run public schools, or who should be able to have what kinds of guns where, we're just not even having the same conversation.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Village. Now, Veritas Village is an off-grid, self-sufficient place for people who are interested in living a normal, freedom-oriented life. You can reduce your reliance on corporations or government systems in your very own energy self-sufficient luxury home with its own water supply, located in a perfect climate to grow your own food. Communities use Bitcoin, and you can also buy your property with Bitcoin as well. www.ecovillages.life/podcast for more info. Please don't forget to mention the Free Cities podcast, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation. That's pretty much it. You don't need a permit for an air rifle, but you do for a shotgun.
Right. And
there's quite strict rules about it. You have to keep it in a special type of cupboard, like a metal cupboard, and you're not allowed to keep the ammo there. You have to keep that somewhere else.
And can they come and inspect anytime they want?
Probably. I don't know, because I only have an air rifle. But they're they're not. It's very difficult to kill someone with an air rifle, but you would never do anything other than shoot small animals with it, really.
I mean, and the American view on it, depending on who you're talking to, it's not necessarily about self-defense, right? It's about defending yourself from your government.
I know.
So,
that is a common misconception amongst Europeans. I've talked a lot about that on this podcast, and that was a big lesson for me, actually. Yeah. You know, like we aren't forced in Europe to have the debate about a number of things that you do. Guns is one of them, abortion, things like this. We just don't have it forced on us, so we don't have to choose a side. But I do enjoy the process of, you know, deciding. And with both of those, both guns and abortion, I can see the value of both arguments. And my conclusion is with abortion, my conclusion with the guns, for example, is that, yes, protecting yourself from your government is phenomenal. And being able to defend yourself, of course. Mm-hmm. But if I was given a choice between a culture with a huge amount of guns or a culture with no guns, currently, I'd still go for the no guns one, because there's almost no gun crime at all, and there's no accidental deaths by guns, etc., etc. But obviously, you would probably look back over at us and go, well, look, your government's treating you like pieces of shit, and if you had guns, you wouldn't be. So it's very hard to say, because we're living in different scenarios. If I was living here, I'm almost certain I would own a load of guns and I would be the same as that. But there's the option's not there.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's a different culture, certainly, but also you don't get the choice of a society with no guns, because you can make them in your garage. You know, they're not complicated machinery. You can spend thousands of dollars and get a very nice, precise one, but something that will just shoot at this distance and protect you or hurt somebody, it's a tube. It's a metal tube, you know?
Right. What about the ammunition, though?
I reload my own ammunition. You can have black powder. You can literally, if you want to, make black powder at home. You can melt lead into balls. You could use whatever technology they had in, say, 1830, you know, out in the western United States. You could do all that yourself, you know, and you can make the parts on any kind of, you know, machinery. If you've got a mill and you've got a lathe, you can make a gun. So it's sort of like saying, let's have a society without arithmetic. You can't, because somebody's going to figure it out, and then you can do it. So that's sort of the discussion that you have a lot in America is people say, yes, we should have no guns. And it's like, you can't have no guns. You can, because people who want guns are always going to have them. So the question is only whether everybody else can have them. The people who won't do the damage, the people who won't harm anybody, you can take them away from them because if they're law-abiding, they'll let you, and they'll say, well, I guess I have to give up my guns. But the people who really need to use guns as tools are always going to have them. So.
I think that was my conclusion is that the arms race in guns has started and it can't be stopped. So in the US, you can't backtrack. So you have to look at where you are and then make a decision based on that. And the decision has to be, if you want to be fair, if you want to be free, it's up to everyone to do what they want to do.
Right. Yes.
But it's almost like sorry to butt in, it's almost like we haven't gone down that route yet. And as a result, nobody thinks about it. No one thinks about guns. Even it's very rare to see a policeman with a gun. No local policeman would have a gun. You have specialist gun units that operate in cities.
I thought that had changed. When I was a kid, I knew that the London Bobbies would just have a nightstick and that was it. But I thought that changed, and you now see them on street corners in cities. Yeah,
in the middle of Westminster, where the politicians are and stuff. Right. And they're not handguns. I don't think
Uzis,
they're whatever automatic. I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
But no, it really doesn't exist. The whole culture of it, and I think most people would say that's good, and because they would look at a place like America and say, you have a lot more deaths due to guns than we do, and that because there's accidental deaths that if the gun wasn't there would happen, but the truth is the answer is it doesn't matter because the arms race has begun and it can't stop, because if you try and stop it, then you basically let only a certain number of people have guns, and they're either criminals or the government,
right?
Because everyone else, if you're law abiding, is going to give it up. And
right, yeah, and so that's exactly the why. I mean, people who are for gun ownership will try to bring that argument up as much as they can. That this is not about hunting. It's not about the guy who's trying to rob you. It's about your government saying, we're going to start putting people in jail for saying the wrong things, or we're going to start making people, take this injection or that injection or get this medical procedure, or we're going to start saying you can't raise certain animals. And at a certain point, you just say, well, you can try,
Here's a question then, because I've had this question with a number of people. What is the actual reality of somebody, combating their government with a weapon, like in real life? Because when I think it through, I think it's going to be very difficult. Say right, the government says, right, you're not allowed to have, I don't know, something in your garden here, and it really pisses you off, and they come around to take it away, and you're right, no, I'm going to confront this. At that point, it's you and it's them, and they're more powerful than you, right?
Right.
So what's the reality of something like that actually happening? Like, say they start creating FEMA camps and they start putting dissident minds in camps and stuff like that.
Okay, so I have an anecdote and I have a historical thing from just not too far in the past, where the Bureau of Land Management was trying to kick ranchers off of land that they'd been using for, decades. And some government agents showed up and said, we're going to kick all your cattle off and kick you off. And they brought 100 friends with ARs. And the government backed down. They're just like,
where was
can't
that?
win this.
Which state was that in?
This is, what's the name of the guy? I want to say Brody. But just look up Bureau of Land Management standoff and you'll find it. So that was an example, right?
Really? And so go into that a little bit. So the federal government, was it, or the local?
The federal government
backed down from a bunch of guys with guns.
Absolutely. Some of those guys ended up going to jail, but then I think the guy who led it got released on it because his trial wasn't conducted properly. We know there's a guy here, I think his name's Jerry Loomis, and he took a plea deal, and so when all the other guys got off, he was stuck in jail. But the government they back down because it's like, well, there's 20 of us and there's 100 of you, and what are we going to do?
And what about the law itself that elicited this? Did that get backtracked?
It was the whole thing was, it wasn't clear what the law was and what their rights were, but they're like, we've been here, our fathers were here, our grandfathers were here, we've been grazing this land. There's no reason for the federal government to own it in the first place, which was a different issue, but you can't just come and kick us off. So that's one example. There's a much older historical example, which is Athens, Tennessee, I believe, where there was a lot of local corruption, and they were, rigging elections, and a bunch of guys had just come back from the war, and they were all armed, and they drove that government out of town. So it does happen. The anecdote that I have is, so in America, when you buy more than one gun at a time, there's a special form. The ATF requires the gun dealer to fill out and send to the chief of police, the local chief of police. And we happened to be talking to our local chief of police about this one day. And we said, so what do you do with those forms? And he said, I shred them. And we're like, well, why do you do that? He's like, I don't want to know what anybody has. Because if they ever give me the order to go around and confiscate people's guns, I'm going to resign. Because I might get them from the first house, and I could get lucky and get them from the second house. But by the time I get to the third house, I'm toast, right? So part of it is, it's like with mutually assured destruction, right? Nobody wins if you actually use nuclear weapons, but the thing is to have a credible threat. And so the purpose of having an armed citizenry it's to not have those fights, right? It's to make those fights so costly for the government that they will always be looking for some means other than direct force to try to push you around.
It's the meme is true. The European mind cannot comprehend that. It's really interesting because, and I think if you go into it, it must have something to do with literally your DNA and your amendments and your bills that allow, just the historical nature of the American person,
It is, and there is a lot of Europe envy in America, where we look, oh, they're so civilized and so wonderful, and we should be more like them. And then there's the other part saying, no, we're different, and we want to be different. So one of the books that I have is called Politics in 3 Jokes. And there are 3 jokes that lead to 3 questions. So just as an experiment, I'd like to try this.
Okay.
So my contention in the book is, if you're going to get into a serious political discussion with somebody where you're actually trying to solve some problem, there are 3 questions that you should compare answers on. So the first question is, what's the purpose of government? So as an Englishman or a European, what would you say it is?
Well, I wouldn't say it as an Englishman necessarily. I don't necessarily. The purpose of government. Well, I know the theories. Whether or not I really understand whether this is correct or not, I mean, I would say it's the smallest thing it could be, and probably it depends how big your country is. If your country is too large, then because I think government should be, local as possible. But if you're talking about like an overall government, I would say it's probably protecting the kind of perimeter of your place, and protecting the rights of your property, so your ownership of things. However, I would still want that to be done on a smaller level than, say, in the US. I think the federal government is it's too big an area of land to be in charge of, I think.
Okay, but those are all mechanisms in how big a government should be. I'm just saying, let's say you didn't have a government and you're suddenly thinking, hey, we need to have one. Why? Why do you have a government? What job is it supposed to do? And so I'll just give you
don't tell me. I want to give you an answer.
No, the point here is that there are lots of different answers. There is no right answer.
Yeah. But I want to think it through so I can hear. Because I want to hear your response to what I say. So we've got no. I mean, at the moment, we don't have a government. Let's face it.
Yeah, we're going to form a government. Why are we going to do that?
But we're literally living as we're anarchists right now. You and me. There's no one telling us what to do. We're sitting here. We don't really need one by the looks of it. Not in your property and what you're doing here and your neighbours but if we go out far enough, there may be a threat from the outside. And if your country's large enough, if that threat's down, 700 miles away. It may not be of concern to you, but in the future it might. So you might appreciate someone, mind you, they'll probably sort it out down there, won't they? I don't know, really.
So what are they doing for me, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
So the funny thing is, you ask people, and there are some people say, you know, and you'll hear politicians say this, the job of the government is to protect people, to protect people's lives, or to protect their property. You'll hear it taught in schools. I've heard kids tell me, oh, the purpose of government is to do things for people that they can't do for themselves, or the purpose is to make things fair, or to make things equitable, or to keep people happy, or whatever. So I'm just saying there are lots of answers, and none of those are specifically wrong. But say I agree with Thomas Jefferson that the point of government is to protect your rights, or I agree with Frederick Bastiat that government is nothing more than organized self-defense. If I start from that answer and you start from an answer about it, we're here to protect people, or we're here to do something, or, you know, redistribute wealth or whatever, we're really not going to agree on what counts as a valid solution, right?
I think the way my thought process works, if I analyze it now, is that I always start with myself. What can I do? And as it gets larger and larger as an issue, I ask myself, can I do it with my neighbors, the people I know? As soon as it gets to the point where I need to include people that have no knowledge of me, that's probably where the point where the government might exist. But in all honesty, I could live in, like where your guys are living, I could live here and never have contact with the government my whole life.
Sure, yes.
You know, if I really wanted to. So yes. I really don't, you know.
I mean, you could, but there is a government, and it is doing things for you that you don't really notice. Like, here's one of the things that you would like to have in a civilized place. I should be able to drive away from my house for the day or 2 days or a week and come back, and all my shit will still be here. That's what I want. And that's one of the things that government is, in some sort of unorganized, inchoate, not well understood way, providing for me. Now, whether you call that protecting my property or protecting my rights, that's a discussion that needs to be had. But the thing is, I am agreeing, you know, that you have rights and I will not transgress your rights, and I have rights and you won't transgress mine. And the government is just there that if one of us steps out of line, you have a way, in an organized way, to come in and do something about it. So that it is just one way, but I'm saying it's just one answer.
But do you think that in that particular instance, is it better to have the government intermediate or the people that live around here? Like, wouldn't you rather deal with them direct?
The people are the government in that case, right? They are. We agree that we have a mutual protection society. So it looks more like NATO than like the English government or the American government, where NATO just says, look, you're France, I'm Germany. You be France, I'll be Germany. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're not going to tell me what to do. But if somebody attacks you, I'll help. And if somebody attacks me, you'll help. So in that sense, Germany and France are protecting each other's sort of right to exist and to be who they are and to live the way they want. They're not imposing any values on it. They're just saying, you have certain rights as a country. We have certain rights as a country. If somebody from outside tries to disturb that, we will help each other. And if your government is a government that just protects rights, that's about it. It is a very small government. And all it's doing is saying, if people attack each other, we will make it easy for the other people who would not like to be attacked to protect each other. That's it. So that is, again, that's one version. The point is, if you think that government is about redistributing wealth or making things fair, then like any question that we think about, medical care, gun control, education, we might as well not even talk, right? So the second question then is, from where does government get its legitimate power?
Well, where does it get its power?
Where does it get its power?
We allow them. We say we will allow you to intermediate between us.
So when you say we, what do you mean we?
Well, me and you and me.
And if we disagree, then what?
Well, then you'll be fighting the government and I won't.
Or you'll be fighting the government and I won't, or we'll both be fighting the government if we're talking about thousands of people. And the government will take action. What gives it the power to take action?
Well, it's a kind of an agreed abstract force, like I say. And if the more, I'm not a fan of democracy, but in the sense that if enough people agree that this abstract force exists and they can convince other people, then it kind of does.
So that's the exact issue then in some senses, if enough people agree, okay? So some people will say the source of government power is majority rule. If enough people vote, then it gets to do this. Now, here's an interesting thing. If that's actually true, if majority rule is the source of the power and not just a mechanism for exercising power, then there's no such thing as rights, right? You cannot talk about the right to say no in a situation where enough people can do anything. So that leads you to a contradiction right away. And so people who think, oh, well, majority rule, blah, 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 that's how we do things, and I have rights. It's like that's an immovable object and an irresistible force in the same universe. They can't exist. So you have to make that choice. You have rights, or majority rule is a source of whatever. So again, I would go back to Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence, where he just says, governments get their legitimate power from the consent of the governed. And then people will say, oh, well, consent is majority rule. And then you say, well, here's an interesting thing. Go look at our federal constitution. I'm sorry, you don't have one, but we have a federal constitution. It has an Article 5, which says, here's how to amend the Constitution. If it turns out that we've said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing, you need to do something, here are the steps that you go through. And then it says, at the end, except whatever you do, you cannot deprive any state of equal suffrage in the Senate, equal representation in the Senate, without its consent. So 49 states say Hawaii only needs one senator. You know what? Hawaii can say, bite me. That's consent. That's not majority rule. So you can't make a serious argument that anybody who set up this system confused majority rule with consent. They clearly knew the difference. So again, if people think, well, the where you get government from is majority rule or just whoever is the strongest or whoever's the smartest, there's lots of ways to answer that. And you look around the world, right? We get it in some countries, we get our power from God. In some countries, well, we have a king who got his power from God. In some countries, it's just whoever is the baddest dude is the guy, right? Those are all answers, right? But the American answer, as I think of it, is government operates from consent. So if I believe that government protects rights and operates from consent, and you think something else, then our chances of deciding how should we have socialized medicine, or how should we run public schools, or who should be able to have what kinds of guns where, we're just not even having the same conversation, right? And then the third question is, when is it okay to violate a principle? Can you say there's absolute freedom of speech unless somebody's feelings are going to be hurt, or unless, it might hurt us in a war effort, or unless, or do you just say, look, you can say whatever the hell you want?
Well, I am that. I don't think I believe in freedom of speech. Therefore, I believe you should be able to say anything you want, and you can. I mean, you can. I can say anything I want right now, right?
I believe actually there are people in England right now who are in prison.
Yeah, but what I mean is, but I still can. Like I still can. I could say anything I want right now. I might have to deal with the consequences, obviously. But but in reality, I appreciate that I'll probably choose not to say certain things just because it causes hassle that I don't need, or that that would be my response. But yeah, I'm an absolutist in that sense.
But that's in your personal life, as opposed to a bunch of other people getting together and saying that you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this, or you must say this, you must use these pronouns, you must say this oath every day, whatever. So these are the three questions, though, right? What do we have a government for in the first place? Where does it get its power? And if you stated something as a principle, when is it okay to ignore that? And if you don't agree on those, then you're going nowhere, right? And I think this is one of the things that many Americans would have very different answers than many Europeans. And that's sort of like, they can't get their head around this idea. They're like, why would I want to fight my government? My government's me, and it's us all together. And it's icky.
I think that's
weird.
it. I think that you've just hit it there. That we do see we don't have the historical DNA telling us that it's them and us. We think of the government as being people that help us to But here it's much more that you were outlaws in a way. You had the freedom and then it was taken away by government rather than the other way around. We're, kind of.
I mean, it's maybe less about, I mean, to me, it may have more to do with the fact that, like, there wasn't an America and then suddenly there was. Mm. And, like, if you live in England, it's like, try to think of a time before there was an England. It's a weird concept, or if you're in France or Germany, it's like, when was there never this? But this America, it didn't exist, and then it was created on purpose. It was designed in a way that other countries were not. They just grew organically. And we were like, okay, screw that stuff. We're not going to do any of this. And here's our Bill of Rights. All the things that we hated that England did to us, we're not going to do them to ourselves. And we're going to have this structure, and here are the limits. And they wrote all this down. We don't follow it, but that's the design, right? So I think that where gun control is concerned, or even things like, socialized medicine or education, it's like, so I look at, and this is a sort of a meme, I don't think that's the right word, but an idea I'm trying to plant in people's heads all the time is, there are two, I think, primary tools that you use to resist a government that's trying to do too much. And the first one is arms, and the second one's education. And so I look at arms, and the American idea is like, hands off. We have a Second Amendment, and you are not allowed to tell us what guns we can have, where we can take them, what we can do with them. I mean, we obviously can't commit crimes with them, but beyond that, you don't get to tell us what we can have any more than China could tell you what to have, right? We might have to fight you someday, and you don't get to tell us. So that, to me, I look at education exactly the same way. It's like, for all the reasons that the government should not be involved in guns, government should not be involved in education, right? I have a T-shirt over here that I just had made for a friend, which it's got a picture of Linus from the comic strip Peanuts, and he's in school and talking to somebody behind him, and says, nobody will give you the education you need to overthrow them. Which I think sums it up perfectly, right? The government would never give you the guns that you would need to remove it from power. The government is never going to give you the education that you would need to remove it from power, or to know that you should remove it from power. So to me, the idea that government should be involved in either of those things, or in religion, right? There are just certain areas where there just should be no government involvement. And education, to me, is one of them. So that drives my thinking about education in large part, right? Sometimes I'm thinking about, okay, given that everybody's going to ignore that and we're going to have something anyways, here are better and worse ways to do it. But to me, guns and education.
Guns and education. I've got a good title for the podcast anyway. That'll get a few people watching.
Yeah.
Guns and education. So, like, what do you think? Go on. What is your answer to those 1, 2, and 3?
I like Jefferson's. I really, if I could just get rid of the government we have and say I'm going to take one sentence from the Declaration of Independence, that men form governments to protect their rights, and those governments derive their legitimate powers from the consent of the people. I would start with that and say, if you take that sentence seriously, it doesn't matter whether you have a Congress or a dictator or whether you have a direct democracy or whatever. As long as you don't do anything that isn't directly protecting rights, and as long as you don't take away people's consent, I don't give a crap how you do the mechanics of it. On the other hand, if we say, oh, we have this very nice constitutional republic, blah, 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 but if the representatives in that republic don't acknowledge that there are any limits to what they do, then that's not an improvement over anything. It's not an improvement over a king. It's not an improvement over a dictator. The key idea is, are there limits? And what are those limits? So that,
I'm just wondering where the anarchists fit into this, or more to the point, people have a real issue in a lot of the circles I revolve in with the social contract. And in a way, you're kind of describing there is still a social contract. Are you saying that there's limits to how free you can be, like actually naturally,
So again, I think NATO is an instructive thing. A country doesn't have to join NATO, right? It could just say, you know what, screw you guys, we're going our own way. On the other hand, if suddenly they get invaded They can't go to NATO and say, hey, help us, because you just told us you didn't need our help. So in that sense, and that's why like Bastiat very clearly just said, properly done government is nothing more than organized self-defense. I have the right to defend myself. I will do a better job of defending myself if I can count on other people to help me. And to make that happen, they have to count on me to help them. And that is the extent of the social contract in that sense. It's just mutual self-defense. And beyond that, I don't get to tell you what to think. I don't get to tell you what to say. I don't get to tell you what to eat or drink or smoke or inject. I don't get to tell you how you get sex. I don't get to tell you anything except if you get attacked, I'll help. If I get attacked, you'll help.
What it makes me think, though, is that countries and governments are formed from individuals. And the problem is that when individuals are allowed to be individuals, they kind of group together in sort of little teams, don't they? And the government are the same. The government's going to have a team, isn't it?
But I would actually... I wouldn't really accept that, because I think people think of themselves in America. I think this is true. And this is one of the fundamental questions. Does society exist for the benefit of individuals, or do individuals exist for the benefit of society? And if you go someplace like communist China and you look at their constitution, they are a constitutional republic too. It actually says right there, it's like, we're mostly interested in the harmony of the whole. And their philosophy is sort of like, you're like a cell in a body. And if we got to get rid of you because you're causing trouble, well, that's just too bad. You have no rights in that sense, right? You're not important. The whole thing is important. Whereas in America, you use things like national security and, defense to try to make people think of themselves that way. But there's a great author named Richard Mitchell, who wrote a wonderful book called The Gift of Fire, and one of the chapters in it is called The Land of We All. And the whole chapter is about the trouble you get into when you misuse the word we. Like we say, hey, we went to the moon. It's like, you know what? I didn't. I had nothing to do with that. Or we gave up slavery. It's like, I never gave up slavery. I never even had the choice of giving up slavery, right? We did this, we will stand with Israel, we will do, we will we will stand with Ukraine, we will, eradicate whatever. That's just not a proper use of the word we, unless you literally think of yourself as some smaller part of a larger organism. But if you think of yourself as an individual, then that's just an abuse of English.
What about we the people then?
It's a bad use of it. You can't have we the people decide to do something, except if each of us needs to supply consent, then there is no we the people. There are some groups of people, and this is like I'm in the middle of writing something where it's like I want the idea of something like a foreign policy. The more I think about it, seems very strange to me, right? And if you go back to George Washington saying, "Look, we should just have commerce with everybody and not get entangled." And one of the ways to do that is we constantly think we, the people, America, have to have a tariff against Canada or against China, as opposed to just saying, I'm a person, there's a person in France, there's a person in China, I would like to engage in commerce, I should be able to do it. Or if I think that Israel needs to defeat Hamas, I can go there, or I can send them money, or I can send them ammunition, or I can act as an individual, right? And so the theme of the thing I'm writing, and I'm going to have hats made up, is going to make America Americans again, right? Individuals who act as individuals and who can deal with individuals, as opposed to making up this fiction. And so what Mitchell would say is, like, you take a statement like, we must support Ukraine. And it's like, okay, so first of all, let's actually think about what we mean by we. What we mean is some part of the American people. But we don't even mean that. We actually mean some subset of a group of people who have been elected to represent the American people. And then you look at that, and they have been elected because they had certain views, but they disagree with the people who elected them on other views. And by the time you actually say what's going on, you basically say, this group of people who have authority without any real source of legitimate power are acting using the resources of those other people to screw those people over. And when you look at it that way, it's like nobody wants to be part of that. Whereas we stand with Ukraine, that can make your belly purr and you feel good and you're like, yeah, I'm part of something important. Whereas if everybody just had to act as an individual, I think you would have very different outcomes.
Isn't that collective, though, a function of the fact that government needs to pay for itself? And really, if you track it back hard enough, they need a collective.
Well, what are you paying for? That's the thing. If all you're paying for is mutual self-defense, that's not terribly expensive.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying on the way it runs at the moment, like it's a self-perpetuating disaster.
You're right. We in that sense is a marketing technique. You say we, and then you feel either good or at the moment bad about it, right? And politics have become more and more divisive here, so that people are starting to say, not my president, not my country doing this. I am not a part of that, which I think is actually a good thing, because if I'm not a part of that, then what I am at? And you hope that they'll actually think about that and say, oh, I'm an individual, and oh, well, they're individuals too. So what if we all just interacted as individuals? Okay, that would be a very different thing. But you can't do that as long as people think the purpose of government is to redistribute wealth or to make people feel good or to prevent people from feeling bad or whatever.
However, though, individuals sooner or later realize that they're more powerful in groups.
Sure.
Groups end up becoming, I don't know what your theory on the evolution of government is in general, but when I've thought it through, it's almost, if you track it back far enough, it's like, say we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't really need a government at that point. We became farmers. We had, and then we had assets that needed protecting, basically, right? So, and we've got a choice at that point. We either protect them or we pay someone to protect them. We pay, so someone comes in, oh, look, I'll protect them. You go and do the work. I'll protect the assets. You pay me some of the assets. We're all good. And then that's when it starts at that point. And it will always evolve.
And there is an organic growth that comes to that, right? And so some people get thought of as protectors, and then their children become the leaders of the protectors. And it grows in all different kinds of ways. But at a certain point, you also get enough consciousness as individuals and enough reasoning ability as individuals that you can evaluate things and maybe do things that are counterintuitive. So evolution sort of always does the next thing that seems obvious. And the point of reasoning, the point of learning to be a critical thinker, to use a term that you like, is to say, maybe I don't have to do the obvious thing. Maybe I could do the non-obvious thing. And that's science, right? That's technology. Those are the things where we say, well, this would be the easy, obvious thing to do, but what if I just take that off the table and put it over there and I think of what are the other things I might do? And then you can maybe find a way, if we're smart and lucky, you can find a way to head off what would be that normal splintering into tribes and incessant fighting. And you say, maybe if we agree to a few simple rules, we'll all leave each other alone, and the energy and effort and money and blood that we put into fighting, we could put into making things and growing things and writing things and creating art, right?
That sounds like a utopia to me, though. Like...
Okay, but you're always aiming for something, right? A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for, right? You should always have something that you're going for, and in some sense, you can look at the Declaration of Independence as that. This is what we would like to have. Will we be able to get it? Well, here's the Constitution. Yeah, we're apparently not going to get it yet, but maybe later we can, right? So I don't think the fact that you can't do something immediately argues against it. It's hard.
Okay. I say that the next evolutionary stage of what's going on in the American experiment is more of an individualization of. I mean, is that what it takes? Probably on the grand scale as well. Secession of states, making them smaller. I mean, I think when I look at it, I see it as a function. The problems are much of the problems are a function of the size of this place that you're trying to govern. And also, I mean, you think, especially when you think about it in terms of Europe. Europe's a similar idea in many ways now, because the European Union is got its own little power center here and blah blah blah, and it seems very absurd to me when I think there's Romania over there and there's the UK there when we were in the EU, and it's like, should they really be governed by the same board of governors? And I think of the US is the same. I know you have more of a national identity, but you know, people are very different here than the people I know in California, for example. And actually, it's a long way away. It's a really long way away.
It is. I mean, my feeling about that is basically you are more willing to help the people that you actually know and like and trust.
Yes.
Okay, and so the farther you try to extend the reach, and I think this is maybe what you're getting at. I don't really care about a lot of people in California. I certainly don't care about a lot of people in Africa or Belgium. You know, I know one family in Belgium that I care about, which sort of leads me to my next point, which is that up to a certain level in time, everything is geographically defined, and that's largely because of the difficulty of travel and communication, right? So you can't, you divide into states, and you divide the states into counties and the counties into cities, because if you're going to make decisions, you can't all just pick up the phone and call. Well, now you can, actually, okay? And so here's the thing. So you ever heard this phrase, ontology recapitulates phylogeny?
No. I'd love to hear it explained though. Ontology, what's that? I didn't even
recapitulates. Ontology recapitulates phylogeny.
Yeah, even if I think of that, I still don't know what it means.
I love it because it's very dense, and it packs a lot of things. What
does the third word even mean, though?
It is so what it says is your evolutionary growth, the stages you went through to become a human, are reenacted during your growth as an embryo. So at a certain point, you have gills, for example, when you're an embryo, because somewhere in your evolutionary development, you had gills. You have a tail that then goes away. So it's not true, but it's true enough, okay, that you can use it as a guiding principle, sort of as a way to, it's true enough that you can use it to think about. So I have another phrase similar to that, which I like, which is topology obviates geography, okay? If I have people who can connect with anyone anywhere, then the fact that they live next to each other becomes less and less important, to the point of not being important at all. Okay, so here's an example of this. So like people in America will say, well, we have to have these elections, and we have to have these states, and we have to, you know, have the electoral college, and we need to get people into Congress so we can get single payer health. European countries can do it. So that's Europe envy again, right? Well, England does this. And so how many people are there in England?
60-something million, I think.
Right. There are more registered Democrats in America than there are in England. So if registered Democrats... People in England, then there are people in England. So if registered Democrats wanted to have a single-payer health system, they could have it tomorrow. And all they'd have to do is give up this whole idea that you have to do the same thing as the guy who lives next to you, right? You give your bank account information to the Democratic Party, and you go to the doctor, and they send the bill to the Democratic Party, and you pay maybe $5,000 a year to help everybody. And George Clooney pays $78 million, right? Warren Buffett, all these guys, they're paying more, but that's your idea, right? That the more you have, the more you should pay. All you have to do is leave everybody else the hell out of it. And you can do that if you give up the idea that the way to do things is through geographically based politics. You connect with the people and you could do education that way. You could do healthcare that way. You could do all the things where the government redistributes money. You could do it that way. You do it directly, topologically, in a network, rather than by fighting to bring people along with you who absolutely hate what you're trying to do.
Well, arguably, I mean, that as a function of the internet, that probably will transpire. I mean, versions of that already do. There are new borders being sort of like, you know, written across the globe based on what's happening on the internet. Right. And I mean, in our movement, the Free Cities movement, it's a very much, there's two ideas behind the evolution of it. One is it's bottom up, and the other is it's top down. A lot of the times the bottom up stuff is online, manifesting in real life. And I'm an anecdotal evidence of that. I mean, currently, almost everyone I know on a day-to-day basis, I know through the internet. I don't know from my geographical place at all. But and the technology is already there to implement that idea, I would have thought. Yeah. But I mean, let's think, why wouldn't it? I mean, obviously, the geographical government wouldn't like it to begin with, because it would put their nose out of shape.
It could, and yet, like, the Democratic Party should be thrilled about this. They can get what they want, right? At a certain point, you hope, and this is, I'm trying to get people with these ideas. Thank you for spreading this virus. I'm trying to get people to get the idea that by letting go of something that no longer serves your purpose, you can get the thing you want, right? And that the image I have in my mind is you're like trying to swim across a pond and somebody has you're wearing a backpack full of rocks. If you just take the backpack off, you can swim.
Do you know what,
can go to where you want.
Do you know what, though? The Democrats, the modern day Democrat might be worried that no one would pay it.
Well, and that would be interesting, wouldn't it? And that would be a very,
But we have a similar joke in the Free Cities movement, which is the idea of free cities are that you have a myriad of competing cities, for example. Mm-hmm. And the joke is that if you had a left-wing city, everyone that would go there would be looking for a free handout, and there'd be no one to give the handouts. Right. So like, it's a bit similar with this plan. It's like maybe there wouldn't be a lot of Democrats prepared to stump up the money because, I don't know.
It is, but the point I'm just making is it was that the ideas evolve and the technology evolves, right? And so the technology actually, in some sense, liberates you to try ideas that you couldn't have tried in 1600 or 17 or 18 or 1900. Now we're free to try those things. And so in that sense, that actually allows you to scale back government in a system, in a sort of gradual way, to say each of these functions, like any function where government's taking money from some people and giving it to other people, you can do that with smaller groups than everyone. And they are still big groups. And that's the point of, like, the Democratic Party is bigger than the population of several countries. Individual countries.
It's a really good idea. Actually, it would show what it would be a free market, and it would actually show the truth of the human experience.
Yeah,
really, it would be really interesting,
right? And
not hard to implement at all. The technology wouldn't be hard. You just have to completely change everyone's mind on a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
And also, if you think about it, the physical monopoly, the mafia, let's call it what it is, they won't like this because they run the physical world based on geography, don't they? And so they'll basically lose a lot of money, presumably.
Or they'll just find new ways, to do things. So I have a friend who jokes that the way that the government grows is they look at whatever the mob is doing. Oh, we're running numbers? Let's have the lottery. We're doing this? We're doing alcohol? Let's sell alcohol in state stores, right? And so it's you look for the thing that they're doing next. And you go, oh, well, we could just, co-opt that and make it a state function.
They'll own the platform and they'll take a cut probably.
But you hit it on the head, right? You need to change the way people think about what government is, which is why I like those three questions. If your conception of government is that it's not about redistributing wealth, then okay, let's just cut that part out and we'll do it some other way. And the beauty of it is, it's like I said, the Democratic Party, if they were serious about this, could have single-payer health next month. They could do it. The technology is there. It's not rocket science. This is not curing a disease. This is not like trying to figure out how do we get rid of malaria. This is just, we know how to move money from some people to other people and then to businesses. That's a known quantity. The only thing that's missing is the idea that maybe we don't have to force that on people who don't want it.
Or fight to get other people
to get it. Yes.
No, to get people to believe in it, basically.
Yeah. So, so those are the...
I mean, yeah. Did you invent that idea, or is that...
As far as I know, I did, yeah. And I wrote two pieces on it. And the second one is about, there's a second component of this, which is sort of the moralistic component, that you want to punish vices and sins, right? And there, again, the technology has brought you along. It used to be, well, we pass a law and everybody in this geographical area can't, buy alcohol or pay for sex or whatever. But it's like, well, or smoke pot. But it's like, okay, what if you could... And I got this idea from, I read about, I think Pennsylvania does this. You can go, if you live in Pennsylvania, you can put yourself on a list. And you say, I don't want to gamble. And any casino that finds you in it can just throw you out and keep your money. So they're punishing you without making gambling illegal, right? It's sort of a distributed punishment system. It's like, okay, if I'm very conservative and I think I shouldn't commit adultery and I shouldn't take drugs and I shouldn't do this and this and this, I can put on a body camera and I can have people monitoring me 24/7. And everybody else can do those things, but I can't.
What about this, though? Because there will be instances where, say we have that system, here you'll be accepting basically a different bunch of rules to your neighbor over there.
Yes.
But what about when your different rules start encroaching on them? Say it was, you can smoke pot here, but they can't, and the smell of smoke wafts into their...
So there are already things in place that people don't fight that much about, which are externalities. Like I can't open a factory next to my neighbor. I can't play noise at all days. And those are already dealt with. But in most cases, why should that prevent me from sitting in my house and watching a movie with some friends? And we're all smoking pot and eating Cheetos and laughing. Who gives a crap?
So
right?
So you mean you would have, if everyone agreed on something, it would be universal. And if they didn't, then it would be very specific. So, yeah, okay.
I mean, I would just get rid of the first part and say everybody agree to what they will be punished for. And if you're not on that list, then you don't get punished for it.
But what about like criminal law and stuff? You know,
so criminal law, that has more to do with... So this gets into government by consent, because people, you say, well, I'd like to have government by consent. People are like, well, what would that look like? And here's how it looks like to me. Everybody sits down and you make a list, and the list looks like this. I don't want anyone else to do X to me. I don't want them to kill me. I don't want them to rape me, assault me, destroy my property, steal my property, pollute my land, right? And the funny thing is, you do this with groups and you run out of things after like 15 things. You're just like, okay, that's about it. If nobody does those things to me, I'm pretty happy. And so that is government by consent. You essentially are just saying, I don't want anybody to do these to me, so if I do them to somebody else, I consent to be punished. And that's it. And anything that doesn't fit on that framework, like, I don't think those two people should be able to trade money for sex. Well, screw you. That's not part of government by consent. Your consent is not needed there, right? Or these people should have to give money to this or not have to give money or educate these kids or do whatever. You've got all the things that you're worried about, right? Well, what if somebody steals from me? What if somebody breaks into my house? What if somebody assaults me? Those are all taken care of through a consent mechanism. And what you're then doing is layering something on top of that to say, but some people want to be punished for things that don't fit in that framework. Great, they could hire people to do it. The Republican Party could set up a thing where they have AI monitoring body cams, and if they catch you in a hotel room with somebody who's not your wife, they punish you. If they catch you snorting cocaine or injecting a drug or gambling or whatever, they punish you, but they leave everybody else the hell alone.
It's like a digitization of the golden rule, basically, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And so that's one of the things when I think about libertarianism, one of my formulations of it is the Hillel version of the golden rule, right? Which I like better than the standard one, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because that opens things like, well, I would like people to give me free dental care. It's like, okay. Hillel's version is what's hateful to you, don't do to anybody else. And
hateful is a contentious word, though, isn't it?
And this is why I would say, what you don't want people to do to you, don't do to them. But it's a completely negative formulation. It doesn't allow for anybody forcing anybody to do anything. It's just, these are things I don't want to do. I don't want them done to me. Therefore, I won't do them to other people.
It's really interesting. So I like that model. You write down everything that you don't want people to do to you, and that forms the basis of governance.
Yeah.
And it's
and anything else is
did you say you've written that and put it in a book?
Those two things, those are in Granite Grok, and I can give you they will be in a book called The Proper Use of Political Parties, because you have these giant political parties that could do all this stuff and not drag anybody else along. Instead of fighting over temporary control so we can steer the bus this way and then they steer it back the other way, oh, now I'm in office, I will repeal. I mean, I don't know if you saw this, Trump is signing things that I'm repealing Joe Biden's repeal of my previous order, and it's just like, this is just such
it's better than in a lot of countries they just kill the people that could have left the
and so yes, it's all being done on paper, and that's good. But the idea is that, yeah, you have these political parties that are just trying to get these small majorities and eke this out so I can have 2 years of control and try to shove things through against people who hate it and are using every parliamentary and legal procedure to get in my way. They're the bag of rocks on my back swimming across the pond. What if I just let go of them? Just boop. That sinks to the bottom and I swim on.
Now I see why you were going on about the individual, though, because what it takes for that to become a reality is to completely switch your perspective on governance.
You absolutely do.
And it has to reside totally in you.
Yes.
But it's a really good idea because, and I can't even imagine it in real life, but I just know it's a good idea. It's like, because the technology is really simple. I mean, you digitize that is a piece of piss, as we would say in England. It's like, here are 20 questions, probably, or whatever you think that you might be. And now an algorithm just pairs all those up together. And every time you interact with someone, the only problem is that you have to monitor it. And then someone knows all that information, which makes me feel a little bit unsettled.
So these are technical questions, but
cryptography could sort that. Actually, cryptography could actually sort that.
And it solves like the counterfeiting problem, right? Maybe I get a badge and it just says I have not signed up for any vice or sin control. Well, if I really did, but I temporarily want to do something bad, I could put that badge on. If it's just a badge, I mean, anybody can have badges made. I have badges that were made. They're the same company.
But cryptographic badges.
But the blockchain, right? Gosh, if only we had a technology that you couldn't fake. Oh, we have one. So again, the technology actually makes it. I did a thing called the Age of Consent, which is not what you think. But it has to do with through history. You always have to get somebody's consent to act, right? And for a while, it's like you have to get the consent of the king. And then you have to get consent of the legislature, or in Canada, you have to get essentially the consent of your neighbors. And at a certain point, you would like to move towards, you just need your own consent. And the technology at each age has enabled the change, right? So when the king has the army, that's how it works. But suddenly you get to America and the people have more guns than the king. Now they can have a different kind of consent.
Do you know what? Your idea should become a computer game first. It would be so easy to do that, like a Sims type game.
Okay.
But it would be interesting because I would like to see it modeled. I would like to see what would happen, because at the moment I'm trying to grasp it in its entirety, and that's quite difficult because who knows how humans will interact. Like human action is a
It is.
But I want to see what happens when people adopt that. It's like extreme ownership of themselves.
It is.
And
extreme responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But which is kind of anarchism, right? I mean, really?
It is, and the only thing that keeps it from being anarchism, and that, again, is Jefferson's conception of government, or Bastiat's conception of government, is you recruit some people to help you with your anarchism. I want to do what I want to do, but sometimes what I want to do requires me to go away for 3 days, and when I come back, I want my shit to be here, right? So we recruit each other for what you might call it, and so I guess I tend to call it minarchism. Like, what's the smallest thing you need to actually do the things that you do need, which is self-defense. Extended in your self-defense should exist in your absence for some period of time.
In your model, who implements the rules? Like, say I am someone who doesn't want to ever rob from someone, and then someone robs from me. Or I rob from someone. So what happens to me? Who does it?
So this is the same way that you have police forces now, except they do a lot less. So that is, in fact, you do create institutions to carry this out, right? And if you look at, say, the Bill of Rights, I mean, you have things like, okay, I have a right not to be searched, but it's not an absolute right, because in order to protect my other rights, I say, look, if you've got enough evidence that I did something wrong, and you can convince a judge to search, and you know what you're looking for. You don't just get to search everywhere and take everything. You know there's a specific thing, there's a murder weapon or a something. Then I consent to that. I say, look, because if somebody steals from me or hurts me, I want you to have that power to find the evidence so that we can prosecute, so we don't have feuds. Great, so I consent to that. And that's what something like the Fourth Amendment actually is doing. It's placing a limit on your absolute right to privacy. It's like, well, in order to protect my right to privacy in a much bigger sphere, I will give it up in a much smaller sphere, right? And so that's the same thing that would happen. All these ideas have been sitting around. What's missing is sort of there's always this idea, well, we need government to do all this stuff. And I'm saying you don't. You don't need government to punish people for sins and vices that don't involve anybody else. You don't need government to redistribute money. And if you take those things away, what's left is very, very small.
The dystopian version of that as well is that you don't even often really need any of that. I mean, this is a social credit score system is exactly that.
Exactly.
And I was just trying to go through in my mind whether you could implement a social credit system in this model without it becoming dystopian. Because really, it would work. It would actually work, but you would still need some things to be adjudicated in real life. But because something would have to say that actually happened. Yes. Like you actually did steal from that person, or you did, Yes. But really, can't believe I'm advocating for social credit scores, but I don't think I am. I'm just like thinking about how the technology could work.
Right.
Because it's a good idea. It's a really good idea. It's like, it's the kind of thing I imagine in 1,000 years' time when we're all flying around in anti-gravity technology. That's probably how we might live, actually.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there are advanced alien civilizations living like that already,
Yeah, there could be, and that would be sort of what it would mean to be advanced, is they don't have to keep a chain around each other's neck all the time.
Yeah. Well, It's a much more efficient way of working because you don't have to convince anyone of your ideas.
Yes.
And you don't have, it's location unspecific. So it's
right. If you and I want to pay each other's medical bills, I don't care where you are. Yeah. It just doesn't matter.
But it would defund. I thought it would defund it would. I mean, it's like a Trojan horse to sort out what is the right way to live your life, because really it would show the true colours of people.
Except I would think of it as more like a Trojan horse where it starts inside the city and you load in all the crap you don't want and you shove it out the gates, right? You're not bringing anything in.
The idea is the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
No, but I think, the idea is the Trojan horse. It's like, do you want a fairer system? Yeah, of course. Well, and the Democrats love fairness, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, right. So you do all the stuff you want to do and we do all the stuff we want to do. Cool. Yeah. And then suddenly you realize no one's going to do their stuff because actually it costs them a lot more.
Yeah.
And there are lots of people over there trying to get their stuff.
And then you have to admit to yourself, like, yeah, this was a bad idea and I needed to steal from people to fund it. Whereas if it was a good idea, people would be joining the Democratic Party in droves.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they'll pay for my medical care? Sign me up. I want to be a Democrat. They'll pay for my kid's school and his football and his trombone lessons. Sign me up. And then you'll see. And then you'll watch like the people going, oh my God, wait, I paid how much? This is too, and then you see, but it's now contained in sort of an experimental lab, and you watch that, and maybe at the end of it, you end up with something that's really cool, and then other people go, well, we'd like that too with some, modifications, and then you get sort of the equivalent of federalism, except it's topological federalism rather than geographical federalism. It doesn't depend on where you live. There are certain things that do depend on where you live, like pollution. That is actually a local thing. So yes, you need to, where you live isn't completely irrelevant, but more and more, the things that people turn to government to do, it is irrelevant because mainly what they want is somebody else to pay for my shit, Yeah,
it's the solution to democracy, isn't it? Maybe it is a next. I mean, democracy is, I know at the moment it's untouchable, isn't it? It's the thing you can't. It's the pinnacle of governance, and if you say anything bad against democracy, you're a heretic.
But it's the word. So and this is the thing. Like one of my favorite, maybe my favorite saying ever comes from Confucius, who said the first step towards wisdom is to call things by their right names. And what we call democracy is not democracy. And what we want when we say we want democracy is not democracy. We should say what we want and use the right words.
Mob rule.
Well,
what would you call democracy then?
Well,
in one word.
I don't even think you can start at that level, because it's power from the people, but which people? And is it power over other people or power over yourself, right? Nobody's even had this discussion. They just say, so it's funny, we have these bonus granddaughters, right? They're not our kids, they're Neil and Emily's kids, but we're basically their grandparents. It's great. So we're bonus grandparents. And they will do things like, I gave a talk at, this club, The Quill, which you may have been at.
I've been, yeah.
And it was called Fuck Fairness, right? And I just went through, like, what do we mean by fair? And it turns out we don't mean anything by fair. All fair is a trigger. It's just, if I say you're being unfair, you're supposed to feel bad, and that's all it means. So what's funny is, one of the granddaughters heard this, and she was probably like 5. And now every time since then that I use the word fair, she's like, fair isn't even a word. And it's great. She got it. She was 5 years old and she got it. It's like, right, that you come up with different models of fairness and they're all incompatible and there's nothing that they all have in common. You only use the word fair when you want somebody to feel bad. That is it. That is the point of fair. So
I'm just trying to think. There must be examples. Like, I think I'm quite a fair father on my kids. And for example, I would say when any of my kids, I've got 3 of them, whenever they're arguing about something, and they will eventually come to me if they can't. Mm-hmm. And I will say that the fair thing to do is to hear everyone's argument. So it's...
Okay, but then when you go to make the decision, how do you make a fair decision?
Well,
great, you say whatever you want.
There's normally a right decision, right?
I don't know that that's the case. There's a right decision for each of those kids.
Yes, but there's normally, in their case,
and then there's normally a right decision for you.
There's normally one where when everyone thinks about it, it makes...
I don't know that that's the case.
Right.
I mean, I think that may sometimes be the case, and those are the fond ones that you remember.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the ones where nobody's happy, and maybe that's one definition of fairness. Nobody's happy. One definition of fairness is everybody's happy. In terms of education, I have a book about this where people think fairness means we spend the same amount on every kid, and other people would say, I would say, fairness is when every kid learns the same thing. And those are just not even close, right? And if you pursue one model, you basically tank the other one.
Well, aren't we just trying to distill our philosophy down to like the building blocks of it? And,
yes.
It becomes, many times when I've done this, I end up with either collectivism or individualism. That's right. One of the places I end up. It's not definitely the right one, because there are other ways to sort of subdivide ideas, right. I think.
Yeah.
But that is definitely one of them.
And the problem is they're just these words, like democracy, like rights. Nobody has any idea what it means. I have a right. Well, I have a right to be left alone. That's like, as Brandeis would say, that is the source of all other rights. But I have a right to free Wi-Fi. I have a right to safe spaces. I have a right to not ever hear anything that I disagree with. And it's just, the word no longer means anything, right? So I think fairness is like that. People have used fairness, and they have used it as a way to beat each other over the head. I grabbed this word, fairness, and democracy is like that. They need democracy. It's like, what do we mean by that? Exactly. We have no idea.
What do you think the real way to use fairness is then?
I don't think there is one. I think we're past that. I would just use different words. I would talk about equitable distribution of something rather than fair. I would say even distribution or preferred distribution, I would always say the first thing before you can say something's fair is like, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish, right? Because it might be all you're trying to accomplish is peace and quiet. In which case, fairness isn't even an issue, right?
Well, it's half and half, isn't it, for 2 people?
But you've got 3 daughters and 2 parents.
I mean, that's a good example. Is often it's like they got more than me. And I wouldn't go straight to 50-50. Yeah. I would start with ownership. I would say, well, whose were they? And who's put the most time and effort into maintaining those things? Like,
sure.
Did they buy them with their own money?
But also, how is this going to affect what happens in the future? How does it make up for what may have happened in the past? So without the context of those things, what's fair in a relationship where we're going to meet one time and do something and we'll never see each other again is very different than we're going to see each other every day for the next 30 years. it's not a useful word. That's all I'm saying, is in almost any context, there are so many ways to understand it that you can both be saying, I'm being fair, and you both mean that you're being fair, but you're not having the same discussion. You know?
I look forward to having some more discussions. My kids are normally, they're happy and content kids, and I think I've thought that part of that reason is because whenever we do discuss things, we want to find a consensus on anything, like critically analyze something and go, well, you know, some people think this, some people think that. You know, here's the pros and cons of this idea and that one, and what do we think?
Right.
And
consensus is a great word. Yes, consensus is a fine thing, and we understand what we mean by consensus. But it's not necessarily the same thing as fairness. You're teaching them a process by which you can resolve disputes, which takes into account the fact that different people want different things at different times for different reasons, right? So yeah, I'm like Confucius. I'm saying, great, use the word consensus. My claim here, and it'd be funny for you to test it, is you could go the rest of your life and never use the word fair, and you wouldn't lose anything. You could just we could hypnotize you and say, you know what? From now on, the word fair doesn't exist. I'm trying to think
when almost the only time I ever use it is in the context of my kids, and I don't think I use it to make them feel bad. Put it that way. Maybe I am, but I'm missing something. But I tend, for me, fairness is a function of what we just said. What was the word? Consensus. So that would be that they would be almost the same word in all the examples that I use. There is a consensus that this is the right way to do things. Therefore, that's fair because everyone said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You know, like.
Sure, but then you look at extreme example. The mob comes to you and says, you're going to give us 10% of everything you make, and you say, okay, we've reached a consensus. Was it fair?
No, but I might not be giving. There might not be a consensus.
Okay, and they'll say, here's the thing: if you don't agree, we'll kill you.
Yeah, it still won't be a consensus. I'll be forced to do it.
It will, but your reasons will not be about fairness. You will still go, okay, you're forcing me to do it, and I'll do it because I value all these other things like staying alive and raising my family and doing the job that I like. But we have a meeting of the minds. I'm not happy. It's not fair. Fairness has nothing to do with it, but it's a consensus, right? And I have my own reasons, and they have their own reasons, and they have force that they can bring to bear, and I don't. Whereas if I have thousands of friends, then we could just shoot all them, and then we're fine, right?
I thought a consensus was an agreement, though.
It is an agreement.
Am I agreeing, really? With the mob? I'm under duress.
It's like signing a contract, right? I mean, you have agreed on the terms of the contract, whether you like them or not.
Yeah, but did you? Like, I could sign a contract without agreeing with it. Like, I could.
Okay, and you could. And you have achieved consensus with the other people involved in the contract, but it's not fair, and you don't approve of it, and you don't like it. Yeah. Consensus just means you agreed to stop talking. That's what it means. Okay, so if I'm in a Quaker meeting, right, and they only do things by consensus, if anybody's complaining, we're not done talking yet.
Yeah.
All consensus eventually means is
shutting up.
We're done talking. We're done talking. I'm not happy.
Maybe that's where I am with my kids as well when they bring me problems. It's like it's a function of staying quiet. But no, I enjoy the critical thought process, and I love watching my kids learn about it because I don't think they don't teach it at school. Put it that way.
No, because why would they? They will never give you the education you need to overthrow them.
I would have thought if I was a teacher, I'd be teaching that. In fact, actually, that's not strictly true. My youngest that still go to what we would call primary school, up to the age of 10, they have excellent one particular teacher there who's brilliant. I really love him, and he does teach them things like that. He does point out the two sides of an argument, and he does,
or the 3 or the 4 or the 5.
Yes, correct. But it's mostly the two obvious ones, you know. But
right. And so every once in a while, yes, you get great teachers who are fantastic human beings and who are very thoughtful and whatever. But as an institution, that's not going to be encouraged by the people who are running it from the top because it actually works against them. So, and it's not even, you know, it sounds like that's a conspiracy theory, but it doesn't require an actual conspiracy. It just requires people sort of acting in their own best interests rather than in the stated interest of the institution.
Do they make that connection, though? Do they really?
You don't have to. That's the beauty of it. You're just acting in self-interest, and the institution and the government that funds it have set up the incentives in the wrong direction, right? So if I'm, say, you've read Catch-22, right?
I haven't read it, no.
Oh, fantastic book. There's this great part in there where you have these army officers, and they're basically trying to steal each other's officers because, like, well, if I get another colonel, then I get 2 captains and 4 lieutenants, blah, blah, blah. And they're not really interested in fighting the war. They're interested in having the largest command, right? The incentives go in the wrong way there. It's just, and this is, Thomas Sowell will often say, look, people don't respond to goals. You can set up goals, but people respond to incentives. And if an incentive is, if I do more of this, I get more of something I want, then I'm going to do that thing. I have no interest if I'm running a school system where I get paid for the kid being there. I have no interest in getting him out faster. If I could get this kid to learn everything he needs to know about age 12, that hurts me because that's like 5-6 years of money that I don't get for him. So my incentive is to string him along, right? And to teach classes where I don't really care if any of the kids are getting it. Maybe there's 3 kids in the middle of the bell curve are getting it, and 5 of them are bored, and 8 of them are just like, what the hell's going on? But that has nothing to do with my incentive, which is to get paid for providing instruction, whether anybody learns anything or not. So this is, just paying attention to incentives is incredibly important.
Bad segue, but you've written 16 books.
Yes.
And I wrote down a few of the titles because there's some brilliant, interesting, unusual titles. I'm just going to read 1, 2, 3. How many have I written down? There's 6 of them out.
Okay.
You tell me, I think it looks like, 5. Pick one and tell me what the hell it is, because I couldn't work out just from the title.
Okay.
Losing the Religion of Liberty, Political Conversion in 3 Jokes. Have we
Conversation.
done that?
We talked about that one.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Political Conversation in 3 Jokes.
We talked about that one.
3 Boxes, A Cure for Government Overreach.
Okay.
Right. That's not the same thing as the first one, is it? 3.
No.
They're not 3 boxes you have to tick.
So that talks about the cartridge box, the jury box, and the ballot box.
Barefoot Learning, What Shoes Can Teach Us About Schools. That one sounds really interesting. What's Barefoot Learning, What Shoes Can Teach Us About Schools?
Okay, so very briefly, I was having a problem with my feet, and I was I was buying all different kinds of shoes and stuff and, trying to fix this problem. And I finally came across these people who talked about going barefoot shoes that are, the soles are... And I tried this, and it cleared everything up, okay? And so I started thinking about this. It's like...
No, sorry, you wear shoes, but they're the shape of your feet.
I wear shoes, but like these are a boxy toe, so my toe isn't being pushed over, and the soles are like nothing. So this is protecting me from sharp objects, and that's about it.
Right.
Okay, and my boots are like that, the mucklucks I have. And so I try not to have anything under my feet except to protect me from getting cut. So the idea is you start looking at this thing and you find, so what these people were explaining is your foot is designed to work a certain way. And by design, I mean designed by evolution, not teleologically. But your foot is supposed to do a certain thing, and it turns out that the way people shape shoes prevents it from doing that. And so you start adding things, arch supports, pronation, supination, you do this, you do that, here's different materials, we'll put air in them, whatever. And none of those fix the problem, which is basically you've prevented your foot from being a foot. And so I was reading this and I was like, holy crap, this reminds me of something. What is it? And it occurred to me, schools. Schools are like this, okay? In that to make your feet work properly, you need to let a foot be a foot and do what a foot is, which is something comes down, the arch compresses and then releases the energy in a certain way, and that's how it's supposed to work. And if you don't do that, no matter what else you do, your feet are going to have problems, unless you're lucky. So in schools, it's like, so you start there with what's the function of a foot? The function of a foot is to absorb this energy of your body coming down and then re-release it. What's the function of a kid? A child. The function of a child is to imitate adults using who are doing interesting and important things. That's what kids do. And everything about school prevents them from doing it. Okay? You are not with interesting people who are doing anything that matters, right? And so they do not get to be kids. So that was what you can learn about schools from shoes. And so it's just you do all these things. You put all this technology in, you put all these pedagogical things in, and it's just like adding all this stuff to shoes. But if you don't address the problem, it doesn't work.
But you have to be in consensus that the point of a child is to mimic adults, though.
You would, yes. If you don't believe that, then this book will
well,
not be useful.
I don't know. I was just I've never thought of it like that. If you would have said, "What's the point of a child?" I'd just say to grow up to be a productive member of society.
So the point is a bad word, right? That's like Michael Faraday saying, "What's the point of a newborn baby?" It's to grow it. But what does a child do? What, in the most raw, basic, fundamental terms? Children are imitation machines. They're apprentices. Yeah. Right. And I mean, I was just so weirded out because, like I said, we never had kids. We have these grandkids, and suddenly, like, you're sweeping the floor. Like, can I help you sweep the floor? And you're like, 10 years from now, you're going to be like, get lost. But you're doing something. You're doing it because it needs to be done. It's not a fake thing that you're doing to waste time. And it's like, can I help? Can I do this? Oh, can I pour the flour into the bread? Can I help you, clean this thing? Can I help you move this stuff? Oh, you're moving leaves from here to there. Let me help, right? And this is what they're doing. They watch you do it. They do it. And this is how they learn. You talk. They talk. You read. They're like, well, reading is kind of interesting. I want to do that. And they learn to do the things that you do. They imitate adults who are doing useful and important stuff. And if kids do that, then they work properly as kids. And if they don't, then they don't, right? And so you can add all this other stuff, but as long as you don't address that central issue, if you are preventing them from being kids, then it doesn't matter too much what else you do. So that's what that book's about.
What were the things that moving to more natural shoes, what did that solve?
My feet stopped hurting. I had what's it? I can't even remember the name of it now. It's been so long. But I had this thing, like I would get out of bed in the morning and I couldn't, plantar fasciitis. I couldn't walk for 15 minutes because everything was so tightened up. Really? And I would try things to sleep in that would pull my, be stretching this or stretching that. I'd put things in my shoes. I'd put things around my feet. I would, and I was at the point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to get orthopedic shoes. I'm looking, it's like, those are going to be $500.
What are orthopedic shoes though?
They actually, you send them a mold of your feet and they make something that exactly fits your foot.
And is that counterintuitive then? Really?
Well, it's intuitive to do it because you think, oh, then my foot will make perfect contact all the time. What's counterintuitive is that's not going to help because your shoe is still screwed up at the front and you're not able to release the energy from your big toe, right? Your big toe is made in a certain configuration so that you get all this energy and you release it. And you release it by using the front of your foot in a certain way. And if you can't do that because your shoes look like this instead of like that.
It was reminding me, actually, in my former life as a film director, we made a film in Russia. It was like 6 or 7 years ago with the Nenets people. Do you know who the Nenets are? They're like a nomadic. They live in teepee. Well, they live in chums. They're called.
Okay.
It's Yamal Peninsula. That's it. It's like one of the super cold. It was minus in centigrade, minus 45 when we were there.
Crap.
And they're nomadic, but they actually. I went out there with my Baffin minus 50 boots, and a full, like I had a zero suit all in one, everything, and it was brutal. My colleague got frostbitten at one point, but they still use reindeer skins for almost everything, including their boots, right? Mm-hmm. Which I ended up trying. Because the kind of Baffin boots I mean, they're these Canadian boots. They're supposed to last down to minus 50, but they don't. Yeah. Your feet get bloody cold. Well, what the Nenets, all they did, right, was they had these kind of like thigh length, big. They were like socks basically, and they were made from fur out reindeer skins on one side. a bit of, not much, but a bit of like hay inside, as in dried grass.
Okay.
And then on the inside, the fur in. So they had 2 layers.
Okay.
And no socks, nothing. So you walk around on the snow, and it would actually feel like you were walking on the snow, because there was nothing to cushion your. But they were I ended up wearing them the whole of the trip in the end, because they were so much warmer. And now I'm thinking about what you're saying. It's like they probably also were better for me, because I was actually walking along the ground, and my foot was doing.
Yes.
It was a weird sensation to begin with. You ever walked on snow in bare? It's like walking on snow in bare feet.
I haven't done that yet. I'll go out and try it later.
Well, you need to find something that you can. You need to put something waterproof, but also they're just warm because there's actually air in there. The trouble with those boots is they put all that felt and stuff in there, but they don't leave any gaps for the air to.
But they're also preventing your foot from moving. They're like, I'm going to pack stuff under the foot and around the foot, and here it's like. And so first of all what that's doing is sending the shock, instead of being absorbed by your arch, is going to your ankles. And if you stiffen your ankles, it goes to your knees, and so you get knee problems and ankle problems. But also it's preventing them from moving, which means you're getting less blood flow, which means, the muscles aren't exercising. So yes, it's actually... So
the ones you use now, they're just very thin-soled and flat, and that's it?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's a boot. This thing is just literally, it's just some deer skin.
They're like moccasins.
Yeah, it's got some sheepskin in, but after like 2 weeks, that's just mashed down into nothing. And the sole is, so if I'm walking across rocks, I feel the rocks.
Yeah.
If I'm walking on something, I feel that thing, which is actually at first it's a little weird. But
do you know about the grounding movement as well?
I've heard of it. Yeah,
you can imagine what it is. But
yeah,
I was, funnily enough, I don't know why. Yesterday I was on the internet, and one of those popped up. A guy had a voltmeter, and he was showing that when he stood on the ground with, I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's a thing now, grounding, isn't it?
Sure, yes.
Maybe you're doing that as well.
I could be. I do have a sole in between me and the ground.
Yeah, but is it made of? Is it a leather?
It's rubber.
Oh, okay.
So
you're
it's
not.
not leather. No. So I'm not. No, I would try leather ones. The main thing is I walk on a lot of rocks and in the woods a lot, and so if I have leather, it's going to rip, and I'm going to have to replace it a lot.
How much land have you got here, by the way?
We have down at the farm, there is around 200 acres, and up here there's around 50.
And do you spend a lot of time out in the woods and stuff?
Not so much in the winter because I don't ski, but in the summer I go out and cut wood for us and our friends, and so I'm out in the woods all the time.
Oh, I'm jealous. I'd love. I once, when I was younger, when I used to live in London, when I first earned some money, I bought 15 acres of woodland, which unfortunately I sold because I used the money to buy a house in the end. Yeah. But for a good 5 or 6 years, I used to go there every weekend and just camp on my own land and just do all kinds, whatever, various forest skills or whatever, It's super nourishing for a guy, especially. Then, interestingly, my middle daughter loves doing that stuff as well.
Yeah,
she's the one with all the knives and stuff. She's always out in the garden. Or we've got land now, so making fires and doing stuff. She's picked it up from me, but it's a nourishing way of life. We just don't have the land where I live. Like, you've got a lot of land here.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons that you were asking Jody about, moving to New Hampshire. Part of it was because there's still land here. Yeah. If I go
is most of your 250 acres wooded?
It is. We just have a little bit cleared to live in. The rest of
it
is all
woods. So you heat
woods.
This whole house with wood, I take it?
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's what I do all summer is cut trees down, and I stack them. We got you can see our woodshed back there, so we have about 3 years worth of wood.
Another hugely satisfying thing.
It is.
I do that as well. We just felled 6 old trees.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're pines, so they don't burn really hot. But I haven't even got through a third of them yet, and we've got wood for days.
Yeah,
it's going to last us so long. I don't even know how long it's going to last.
Well, I mean, we have a fire in the winter just constantly, and so we go through about 3 cords. I would say.
Does it run all night then?
There will be coals in the morning, and so we have to get it going again. And we could get up in the night, and, like set an alarm and get up at 3:00 and put it in, but we're just too lazy.
Yeah, well, you don't need to, do you?
So yeah,
you only have to put up with 10 or 15 minutes of
we
cold
get
air
up.
in the
It's
morning.
like 50 degrees in the house, and so you make coffee and you make a fire. And
Is
it's
it
fine,
really
but
insulated in here?
No. This was originally a hunting cabin. The part we're sitting, ending right here, was a hunting cabin. It had terrible insulation. At one point, we made this into an office, and it turns out there was insulation in here, which was keeping. But really, no. This is not a house that we would build from scratch. So in that sense, it's very much like an education system, right? You could say, well, we can tinker with this and we can tinker with this, but really what you want to do is just start over and say, what's the house we would want? Yeah. And we know what house we would want if we could do it, but it's too much money and it's too much trouble. So
you could put another layer of what we call kingspan, that stuff, that insulation.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm about to do that, I think, to an outbuilding we've got at home, which is just makes your rooms a little bit smaller on the inside. That's all it does.
Yeah. And we could do it, and we could do things with the windows, and we're probably going to put insulation under the floor because this is up on pilings. So there's, 2 feet under there. So that gets cold. That floor down there is actually on cement, so that gets cold. But
if it ain't broke, don't fix it sometimes.
Right. Yeah. So we'll do what we can. I would love sometimes to just get a bunch of Amish people up here, lift the house up and turn it 90 degrees because the sun's over there. And so all the windows are over here, So yeah, it's just the house is facing the wrong way. But it's just the place we live is so wonderful.
Have you ever thought about taking your excess energy and turning it into heat in any? I know it's not a very efficient way to heat things, but it could because you've got excess energy, right?
We do, and it means we can run, like we have a heater now in one of the bathrooms, and it's electric, and we can do that during the day. It wouldn't even run the batteries down that much. I mean, we're looking more for things like to get a big chest freezer and run that. We want to replace our gas water heater with electric because then that's free, as long as we have the system. We haven't thought too much about using it for heat. Somehow that just seems extravagant.
Well, yeah, it is. But if it's excess heat,
yes.
Like presumably some days it's they switch off and they stop topping the batteries up, right?
Yeah, they do. And yes, on a day like today, they were done by like 11 a.m. So the rest of the day
Bitcoin miners up here. Well, why not?
It's not that much electricity. What we would probably do at some point is we'll get an electric car because we'll be able to charge it, and top that off. So we are always looking for, what else could we do with electricity that we now do with propane? Because propane is really our only connection to the world, the grid. They have to come up here twice a year and fill up a couple of tanks. But we're using less and less all the time.
But you could even buy those. We used to have propane at our last house, but we used to buy or borrow. Used to pay for these big canisters that were only this big.
Yeah.
But we only used it for cooking, and we did have an on-demand heater actually that used to work. But we didn't really get through much. I used to get through 2 big ones of those a year.
Yeah, we have one of those. They're just hard to move around. But we had one. We have a heater in that room that we just run when it's really, really cold. Most of the time we ignore it. We use propane for the water heater and for our stove and oven, and that's it. So it's not very much, and we could probably go for 2 years and not get a fill up and still be okay. But it is still sort of one more connection where, we're going to raise the price of propane by a factor of 10,
Yeah,
and then you're like,
if you get an electric car, that's a whole new world of pain.
Is it?
I think it is because can you fix an electric car?
I can't.
And
I think I know people who could,
what happens when the batteries, as far, when you said, well, we're self-sufficient and the prices, wouldn't be surprised if you worked it out on paper and realized that the purchasing of an electric car, because buying a second-hand electric car is probably not a good idea because it's the battery that's the thing. So you have to spend quite a lot of money, and then who knows? It would have been cheaper just to use a diesel one or I don't know.
What a lot of people around here do is they have golf carts, electric golf carts.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Because then when, the batteries wear out, it's easy to pop it out and get another one. You fix it. And if the whole thing craps out, it was, they're getting them used from golf courses for, $1,000 or something.
But where do you go? Where would you go?
We would go up and down our road. We would go to the farm in a golf course or a golf cart. Yeah. I would, drive out, like if I need to take a bunch of chainsaws out someplace, throw them in a golf cart, take them out on a path and leave them where I'm going to use them. Stuff like that. I mean, people just use them to get around. We had a couple at the farm down there, and they mostly would use them like, I got to take a bag of grain over to the chickens. You throw it in the back of that, and you just go over. So they're really nice, and they're easy, and they're quiet. And as long as they work, they're great. And then they stop working, and then nobody can figure out how to fix them. And
quad. We would use a quad bike still, I think, but they are noisy.
Right. So and we have one of those, and we're having some problems with it. But we'll get it fixed up, and so there are things you can do with it. But it's just people keep telling us like, if you had an electric car, then you could charge it basically for free. Or a hybrid, right? So that you can still run it on gas if you need to.
Yes.
And that would be a better choice. Probably.
I don't like all this electric stuff, I'll be honest, because of it because it disempowers me as a fixer. Yes. It really does.
Yes.
And also it means that I'm beholden to the battery companies, really.
Yep.
I have to buy a new battery. And I know Tesla batteries don't have a long life, like they're the main one I know about. They don't have a particularly long life cycle in a car. And when you change them, they're like a substantial cost of the car. It's not like you just go and get a new battery and pop it in. It's like half the car.
That's the major component of the car. That's the thing that makes it different from other cars. So yes.
Whereas I've got a Toyota Hilux that has a really simple engine in it. When you open in 2015, when you look inside, you'll recognize all the parts. But when you drive them, if you've been driving new cars, you'll be like, something wrong with this, because you have to put it into gear for real. And
I actually prefer that.
Me too.
I don't mind that at all. I mean, we have a truck that somebody's borrowing now. It's manual transmission. I'm fine with that. I like that. And I think we talked about this when you first got here. I have come to appreciate more and more pieces of equipment where all the connections are visible and traceable and understandable. And as soon as you put a computer into something, it's like that link is broken. That could be doing anything.
Well, that's the point, and it is doing anything.
Yeah.
My car that you kindly got me up that hill there in. The first thing it does when you switch on is it says Google Services is sending. Do you agree to this, that, and the other? And I went through and I ticked everything. No. But almost certainly. I mean, there's sat-nav in there, there's everything. I am a product driving around and people are tracking me and I don't like that. And if you don't have to go back that far in history. Like my 2015 is a great truck. I love it. And it's got electric windows, which is, so it's got some mod cons, but beyond that, it's just a good truck. And I can, the last time it got fixed, it cost me about $300 to change something. Whereas the one we had before that, which was a Land Rover Discovery or whatever, that was always more than £1,000 whenever something went wrong. Always. And half the time it was the sensor that needed replacing, because the light came on and said there's, like what bugs me most is when it tells you there's not enough air in the tires.
We get
when
that.
Did we ever have that?
And there's some special battery we need to buy for the sensor in the tire.
Yeah, but when did you ever need to know how much air were in your tires? You've either got a puncture or you're just driving around in your car, because you can tell. Hopefully, you can tell if you can hear that you've got a puncture. Other than that, the wheels are the wheels. It doesn't have to be exactly full of air. I know.
Yeah. No, it bugs me. No, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's just, but even beyond like the radio and Google, it's just, we're using a computer to, manage the mixture of air and gas. And if that decides to crap out, then you can't do anything, So it just, I am really getting to appreciate all the things where, I'm not a car fixer. I know many people who are, right? And I sort of envy these bonus grandkids because they're growing up on a farm where people are fixing shit left and right all the time. and they're going to see it. And that's the attitude they'll be in is if something breaks, you fix it, you know?
They will, unfortunately, though, do away with petrol cars and diesel cars.
We're going to try.
Do you think that people might take up arms in this country if they try and get rid of that?
You know, I think that is one of the things that it could be. But one of the things that happened in COVID was I really thought religion. I thought churches were going to be a line you couldn't cross, and people just caved. And that was one of the most depressing things I ever went through. It was just like, they're like, oh, sorry, you can't go to church on Sunday. And I thought, man, I don't go to church myself, but I was like, man, that's not a thing you just say okay to. And then they said okay to it. So I don't know. I don't know how conditioned people are, how much they value now convenience over freedom or responsibility, wherever. And it might just be they're like, okay, this is how it works, right? You just tell us what to do and we'll do it. I don't know. But that would be, I mean, Americans do love their cars. I think that's right up there with guns. So it's going to be interesting. Right now, my sense is that they announced this because they want to sound like it's a lofty goal, but they don't really have the intention of doing it. They just push...
Of what?
Of actually getting rid of internal combustion. They just say, well, we'll push it back another 5 years. Because they're never like, okay, next year we're doing this. It's always like, oh, in 2050, we'll do it.
Yeah, but it depends because it relies on the environmental spiel, doesn't it? If that people seem to be losing. I've noticed, just my anecdotal kind of eye has noticed that far less people believe in that stuff now, and it's kind of cracking. And
that's why I'm saying I don't think they'll ever get around to doing it. And that, you get places that, we'll buy a fleet of school buses that are all electric, and they won't run in the winter because we forgot batteries don't work that well in the cold. So I think people see the stories, and people have been told, New York City is going to be underwater by 2018. No, wait, we meant 2020. No, we meant 2024. Next year it'll be underwater, and people are just like, at a certain point, it's just fatigue. You just like, okay, I'm not really gonna listen to that anymore. So I think that's one of the ways that any movement like that can overplay their hand. And just keep saying, and that's the thing you see with Trump. Trump's a Nazi, and at a certain point, people just, okay. You just keep saying that, but,
But they can normally keep finding a new thing. That's the thing, can't they?
Possibly, and they might, yes. Although, again, I think I hope that people just get fatigued and just say, you know what, let's move on to something more substantive, right? Oh, the end of the world's coming. No, the end of the world. Right, now it's coming, right? So you saw around the end of the century, all these people, the God is coming back and we're all going to die or something, blah, blah. And it's like the world will end in the Mayan calendar. And it's like after a while, it's just like, okay, another one of those. That kind of fatigue. Like, yeah, I've heard this. Tell me when the meteorite is, going to hit next week. and then I'll worry about it.
Might be wood fires. That's something they talk about where I live. Can you believe that? I mean, and the worst thing about trying to ban wood fires is that you can see smoke coming out of people's chimneys. So from a long way away where I live.
Yeah.
And it would be a real thing, that, because everyone I know uses wood.
Yeah.
Not to necessarily heat their whole house, but for fun, really.
Yeah.
It's, we use it often to heat a lot of our house. But we sit around the fire every night, but yeah, I don't know if they banned it in towns already.
Right. And that's the thing. So the people in town are just like, okay, whatever. But seriously, there's a lot of people out who need internal combustion engines, and they need cars, and they need, to run their stoves using fossil fuels, and they need this stuff. And when you suddenly come and say, yeah, you can't do that anymore.
Well, they can't. They won't. It's like,
you guys will just give in because you have no guns.
How do they know what you're doing up here anyway? Does anyone ever come up here?
No. People don't very much. And there's an interesting thing in New Hampshire, which is one of the things I love most about it. So the towns, every town will revalue property every once in a while because they need to know how much you have to pay them to run schools and stuff. So they send people to come up and we'll measure your house and come in and see how many bedrooms you have and whatever. And you're free to just say, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And they'll turn around and leave. Yeah, you don't have to let them on. Yeah, they're supposed to do it, but you just go away.
I bet most people don't realize that as well.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, but the people doing it have probably had enough shotguns pointed at them that they're like, okay, have a nice day.
Well, Ian, we've been talking for nearly 2 hours, mate. I've already been speaking to your wife for an hour, so
yeah. So
I'm still reeling from your idea of what's the book called that's in then?
Which the
extreme self-governance.
It isn't a book yet, so I will send you the. I can show you the grant.
Does it have a name? Does that governance model have a name?
It doesn't yet. So if you'd like to come up with one, you could. So yeah.
I like challenges like that. I can't. It's I don't know. It's the kind of thing that, like I say, I either want it to be a science fiction book or a computer game that I can model, because I want to see it. I want to see it play out.
Yeah.
Like in a kind of Sims, where everyone says what they can and don't like right from the beginning, and then an algorithm then acts as the law, and because it would, I'd rather see it modeled before it got rolled out, if you see what I mean.
I'd be happy to consult on anything that anybody wants to do with it. I'm not the guy to write either of those things.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it's something for the far future, unfortunately.
But what I'm trying to do, so there's Milton Friedman, who I'm sure you know about. He said something that motivates me. It keeps me going sometimes when you just think, God, everything sucks. He said, only in a crisis will you have real change. And when a crisis occurs, what happens next depends on the ideas that are lying around. When, as he put it, and I love this phrase, when the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get people to think about things like community centers instead of schools, and thinking about using political parties instead of a whole government to get what they want or whatever. So if I can stick that idea in your head, and you'll go away, and a week from now, a month from now, you'll be thinking about us and go, could we make this work? Then I've succeeded.
Well, the place that you try these things out, believe it or not, are in free cities. And in like the special economic zones are the same for economics.
Yeah.
You try out a new model in a small area. But yeah, I mean,
what's funny is it's still the free cities, and I don't know that much about them, but it is still it's somewhat geographic. We're all going to get together here.
Yes, but you could as a microcosm, you could say within the confines of this city.
Sure, but you could also then say we will have several cities in a network, and they don't have to do, right? They can cooperate with the other cities, and you see what can work in a network and what has to be in a locality. And that's a way to experiment with that, because nobody knows the answer to that question yet.
No.
But more and more, I think more and more you will find things like we don't have to actually be in the same place to do this.
I know, but the beautiful thing about what you're describing is that it's a function of technology.
Yes.
Which is great, because you can't look to the past to see where it's been manifested before. It doesn't. And so it has never been tried. It can't have been tried. There's no way you could have that system unless it exists in a kind of personal, interpersonal way, which it kind of does, I suppose. When you meet someone, like in the street you've never met before in a random place, you've got things that you won't do to them, and they've got things that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. No. It's just this very small, least common denominator of what we've agreed not to do to each other, which mostly means don't hurt each other and don't take our stuff, which, then becomes libertarianism, that's what we were saying. And it's like, yeah, okay, but you don't need the name. You just need the idea of consent.
Before we go then, do you think libertarianism is kind of like, and don't take this the wrong way, but is a very elevated form of living, a very high, do you know what I mean? Like, is it, when you go through the evolution of life and of ways to interact with your fellow men, is this kind of like at the pinnacle of what you could understand about life?
Oh, I don't think it's the pinnacle at all. I think it is, I think it's the distinction I see between that and other political movements is they're at least trying to base everything on first principles, which I'm a big fan of, right? I mean, you look at the Republican Party, what do they stand for? Who the hell knows? Nobody knows. What do the Democrats stand for? What do the various parties in Europe stand for? Nobody. We want this bag of stuff, and we don't like that bag of stuff. And like right now, somebody's a Republican here. If they say, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, it tells you nothing about what they actually think about almost anything. Statistically, you can say, yeah, if they're Democrat, they're probably pro-abortion, but Republicans are too. Or they're probably anti-gun, except some of them are pro-gun. So it's just, there's no set of principles there except we want to win elections. Libertarians have the luxury of knowing they're not going to win any elections. So they can be very principled, right? And it's
until they start winning, and
right when they start winning, then it'll suddenly be, oh, now the extra principle that comes in is we must continue to win, and that changes everything. That changes the nature of the venture. It changes the nature of the institution. It changes everything when your concern becomes winning, right? So in that sense, you can say, I would say they have a more principled stance, but they can afford to. Right? Because they're never going to be called upon, or not never. They will not anytime soon be called upon to actually solve problems and have to deal with all the people who want to kill them as a result of their solutions, which Democrats and Republicans have, centuries of experience with. So, but elevated, I think, is
what I mean, though.
Wrong,
is it?
It's more.
I put it this way. I think. Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily. I don't know what to. I wouldn't say I'm a libertarian because I don't really know what that means necessarily. It might mean something different to you. But the principles of non-aggression, the principles of, the golden rule, all these kind of things, they seem to be the kind of ideas that you end up at, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and I think though that you end up at them when you have a certain set of experiences. Like, in fact, I'll give you a copy. You can have that, and I'll give you a copy. The one of the books you mentioned, Losing the Religion of Liberty, it's actually about this. It is about sort of becoming a religious, in a sense, libertarian. This is the right answer, and how I sort of got away from that. And now I just look at, okay, this is one possible way to run things. There are lots of possible ways to run things depending on what your goals are. So again, it can come down to something as simple as if you decide as a matter of choice, not as a matter of a principle in the world, not as like a law of gravity or anything. If you decide as a choice that individuals are more important than society, then yes, libertarian is going to seem very obvious to you. But if you believe that humans are, you take more of a Gaian thing, humans are this sort of bigger, not even a species, but there's some magic organism that's doing this stuff, and you're just one little part of this organism. Then if you have to go, you have to go, right? Then you just get a completely different view of things. So, and so if, we have to get rid of the dissenters. If your goal is some kind of harmony, then okay, that's fine. If your goal is, no, the dissenters are the important ones, then it's not fine.
In the Free Cities movement, that is solved by competing places, small competing places who have their own ideology,
right.
Or
okay.
They're basically contractual. I mean, you don't have to be,
right.
But the model that I like the most is we build a city. It has a wall.
Yeah.
And if you want to join the city, you can opt into the city whenever you want. There is a contract, an actual contract, not a social contract,
right.
an actual contract that says what you can and can't do. And if you choose to, that's good. If you don't, you go to that
Here's
city.
the door,
you go to the other one that does do what you want.
Right.
And, but I kind of, in a way, I like your idea of having that aspect of it exist in the digital realm, because that's a more 21st century. I mean, the ideas of free cities have existed kind of without mind you, we're using the contract. That's the kind of innovation, yes. I suppose. But the innovation with yours is you don't have to change a huge amount. I mean, you do, but about the actual physical realm, you don't have to change a lot.
All the things that I'm advocating, the technology exists. We know how to do it. We do it for other things. We have insurance companies. We all pay money in, and then they pay money out in somebody's house. There's nothing new here. It's just letting go of this idea, well, everybody has to get insurance from my company. It's like, no, they don't. They can go without insurance. They can get a different company.
Do you know what? Another expression that we use a lot is governance as a service. And what you're describing, it should be.
Yeah.
Governance is a service that should be provided, and you should be able to choose between your governance. So if you're not getting a good service, you should be able to get a better service. I know democracy apparently solves that problem, but it doesn't, as we've just kind of discussed. Yeah.
Oh, I like the word service because, like, to be serviced, like you get serviced like a bull services a cow. You know, that's how I think of government service. Yeah, I'm going to service you real good.
No, it's not. It's the treat me. I
meant to tell you earlier when you were talking to Jody, you were talking about state mottos, and actually, you know, if you're not in America, you don't see these things, but ours changed during COVID. It is no longer live free or die. It is now public health trumps everything. And also the New York changed theirs from the Empire State to in loco parentis. That's actually their motto now.
I'll take your word for it. Let's end on some good misinformation. That's what I like. Ian, thanks indeed for. I wish we could do this again.
You like to do it in person, but otherwise, I
do. Unfortunately,
I can do this forever.
It's a prerequisite of what I do, and I you probably understand why.
I do.
It wouldn't be the same online, and it wouldn't be the same having to drive down your drive and all this stuff. But this is I get something out of this as well, and not only just this conversation, but in the fact that I've come to this amazing place, and I've seen. You know, when I go, I'll remember there's two people living just there.
Well, if I'm ever in the UK, I'll let you know ahead of time.
Come to our farm. You'd be welcome to. But thanks very much for your time. And
Thank you.
I've loved this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you.